They say homeownership is the American dream. A little patch of land, a driveway big enough for your toys, and the freedom to live life your way. At least, that's what I thought I was buying into when I moved into my neighborhood back in 2022. What I didn't know, what nobody warned you about, was that sometimes the biggest threat to your peace of mind isn't a burglar, or the weather, or even your mortgage. It's three little letters. HOA. Now, let me back up for a second. I'm not the kind of guy who leaves junk in his yard. I'm not the guy with 5 broken down cars sitting on cinder blocks, or a pile of rusting appliances in the front lawn. My property? It's clean, it's well kept, and it's mine. But like a lot of homeowners, I have a couple of utility trailers. One is enclosed, white, box-shaped, in good condition. The other is an open flatbed that I use for weekend projects, yard work, and hauling. These aren't toys. They're tools. They're insured, tagged, and ready to go at any time. So back in 2022, I parked my enclosed trailer in the driveway, right in front of my detached garage. Nothing unusual. It wasn't blocking the road. It wasn't spilling onto anyone else's property. It was just sitting there, minding its own business. But apparently, that was enough to rattle some clipboard warrior sitting in the office. One afternoon, I get the mail, and tucked between the grocery coupons and utility bill is a very official-looking envelope. Bold letters at the top. Homeowners Association Notice of Violation. Now, if you've never received one of these before, let me paint you a picture. The wording is always the same, sterile, condescending, and just threatening enough to make your blood pressure spike. I open it, and right away I'm being accused of violating HOA bylaws. According to them, I had an abandoned vehicle in my driveway. Their words, not mine. Abandoned. Like I just dragged a broken down husk of a car from the junkyard and dumped it there to rot. But that wasn't all. The letter went on to reference another article in the bylaws, the one about house and travel trailers. Supposedly, my utility trailer was a violation because trailers weren't supposed to be visible from the road. And then, like a cherry on top of their bureaucratic sundae, they said I had 7 days to rectify the situation. 7 days. But here's the kicker. The letter wasn't dated. I sat there in my kitchen rereading it and thought, 7 days from what? The day they wrote it. The day I received it. The day the mailman felt like dropping it off. For all I knew, I could already be in violation of the 7-day grace period just by opening the envelope. And let's talk about this word they used. Abandoned. My trailer wasn't abandoned. It was insured, tagged, fully operational. If I hooked it up to my truck, I could have hauled a load right that second. Nothing about it was junk. Nothing about it was abandoned. The bylaw they cited, it wasn't even about utility trailers at all. It specifically said house and travel trailers. We're talking RVs, camper trailers, stuff people live in or vacation with. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere, did it mention an enclosed utility trailer. The only travel my trailer ever saw was a run to the hardware store or the dump. So I did what any reasonable, fed-up homeowner would do. I sat down and wrote a response letter. Not angry, not ranting, just methodical. I pointed out the obvious flaws in their notice. First, their 7-day ultimatum had no date to measure against. Second, my trailer wasn't abandoned. It was fully legal and functional. Third, the bylaw they cited was irrelevant to my situation because it only applied to house and travel trailers, not utility trailers. I laid it out like a lawyer preparing for trial. Every point backed with logic, every accusation dismantled piece by piece. Then I mailed it back and waited, and guess what? I heard absolutely nothing. No rebuttal, no fine, no threats. Just silence. The whole folded like a cheap lawn chair because they knew they had no case. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. I thought maybe they'd learned their lesson. Maybe they realized I wasn't the type of homeowner they could bully with vague threats and sloppy paperwork. I figured I bought myself some peace and quiet. But here's the thing about HOAs. They never really stop. They don't like to lose. And when they see a homeowner stand up for themselves, they don't chalk it up as lesson learned. They see it as unfinished business. Little did I know, that letter in 2022 was just round one. For a while after that first skirmish in 2022, things went quiet. Too quiet. You know that uneasy calm after a storm, where the sky is clear, but you can still feel the tension in the air. That was my neighborhood. I went about my life, parked my trailers where they needed to be, and carried on like any homeowner would. And honestly, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the hoe had gotten the message. That they realized picking fights with me wasn't worth the paperwork. That they finally decided to spend their energy on something that actually mattered, like fixing the broken swing set in the park or trimming the overgrown hedges along the entrance road. But if you've ever dealt with an hoe, you know that's wishful thinking. HOAs don't like to admit defeat. They don't just let things go. If they feel like they've lost once, they'll bide their time, waiting for the next opportunity to come after you again. Fast forward almost 2 years. Life was good. My enclosed trailer had long since been parked, moved, and used for projects. I'd added an open utility trailer to my collection. A simple flatbed, nothing fancy. Just the kind of trailer every homeowner with a lawnmower and a couple of DIY projects needs. This one, I parked in my backyard. Now, let me paint you a picture of my property so you understand why what happened next was pure nonsense. My backyard sits behind a detached garage. This garage shields most of the yard from street view. If you're standing on the road, you can barely see anything behind it unless you crane your neck or go looking for it. My open trailer was tucked into the far back corner, parked neatly, not blocking anyone, not rusting, not collecting junk. Was it technically visible if someone really wanted to pee? Sure, but let's be real, so is the neighbor's rusty trampoline. So is the boat 3 houses down that hasn't touched water in 5 years. So is the broken basketball hoop leaning against another driveway. But do you think the hoe was sending them letters? Of course not. One Wednesday afternoon, I checked the mailbox and there it was again. Another official-looking hoe envelope. My stomach dropped, not out of guilt, but out of sheer irritation. You know the kind of irritation that makes you sigh before you even tear the thing open, because you already know it's going to be something ridiculous. Yeah, that. Sure enough, I opened it, and there it was. Another violation notice. This time, they were coming after my open utility trailer. According to them, I was once again in violation of the same bylaw they tried to use against me in 2022. That same tired article titled House and Travel Trailers. Only this time, they attached a photo as evidence. I held the letter in one hand and the photo in the other. And I actually laughed out loud. Because you know what the photo showed? My trailer, in the backyard, neatly parked in the far corner, exactly where I said it was. And you could clearly see that it was shielded by the detached garage. The photo was basically proof that I wasn't violating anything. It was almost comical, like they were trying to build a case against me, but their own evidence sabotaged them. Now, most people would probably get nervous at this point. They'd scramble, maybe move the trailer, maybe apologize just to avoid the headache. But me, I'd already been through this rodeo. I knew how flimsy their accusations were, and I wasn't about to let them push me around a second time. So I sat down, once again, to craft my response letter. And let me tell you, this one wasn't just a defense. It was a straight-up knockout punch. I started by pointing out the obvious. The trailer in question was an open utility trailer, not a house trailer, not a travel trailer. It didn't qualify under the bylaw they cited. Period. End of discussion. Their own attached photo clearly showed the trailer in my backyard, not in the driveway, not on the street, not obstructing anything. If anything, the photo supported my case, not theirs. I reminded them, politely of course, that they had tried this exact same stunt back in 2022, and it had fallen flat then, just like it was falling flat now. And then, just to twist the knife a little, I told them to quit wasting everyone's time. That if they couldn't properly interpret their own bylaws, maybe they should spend more time reading them instead of harassing homeowners who weren't doing anything wrong. I mailed it off, confident as ever, because deep down, I knew this wasn't about bylaws. It wasn't about trailers. It was about the hoe testing me, seeing if I'd roll over, seeing if they could wear me down with repetition. But here's the thing, I don't roll over. And as I dropped that response in the mailbox, I couldn't help but smile, because I knew I just checkmated them again. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was that this little back and forth over a trailer wasn't just about me anymore. It was about to turn into something bigger. Because once word got around the neighborhood that the hoe had tried to pull the same stunt twice and lost twice, people started asking questions. Questions the hoe wasn't ready to answer. And that's when things started to get interesting. You'd think, after being proven wrong twice, the hoe would just back off. But here's the thing about HOAs. They don't like being embarrassed. And nothing embarrasses them more than a homeowner who knows the rules better than they do. After my second letter, I thought maybe they'd just let it go quietly. But instead, something strange started happening around the neighborhood. It started small. A neighbor from 2 houses down stopped me one afternoon while I was unloading tools from the trailer. He kind of leaned in, lowered his voice like he was sharing a secret, and said, "Hey, I heard the HOA came after you again. Over that trailer, right? What happened?" I explained the whole thing, told him how they tried to use the same bogus bylaw, and how their own picture proved my point. He laughed and shook his head. "That's classic. They tried the same thing on me last year with my RV. I didn't even fight it. I just moved it. Wish I'd done what you did." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just me versus the HOA. This was a pattern. They'd been pulling the same stunt on other neighbors too, and most people didn't push back. The HOA was counting on fear, confusion, and inconvenience. They'd send a vaguely threatening letter, cite a bylaw that may or may not even apply, and wait for homeowners to fold. And the truth is, most people did fold, because who has the time, the patience, or the energy to argue? But unlike most people, I had the receipts. I had proof. And more importantly, I had already beaten them once before. Word started spreading faster than I expected. The neighbor with the RV told another family across the street, who came over one evening while I was mowing the lawn. They asked, "So what's the secret? How'd you get them to back down?" I told them the truth. You don't roll over. You read the bylaws. You know the rules better than they do. You hold them accountable. Before long, I realized my little backyard trailer had turned me into something of a local folk hero. People were frustrated with them, but nobody wanted to be the one to go head-to-head with them, until now. Suddenly, I was that guy, the one who fought back, the one who didn't cave, and the HOA noticed. That's when the subtle games began. I started getting these little warning letters in the mail about things that were laughably trivial. Grass, slightly too long, a decorative item on my porch that supposedly violated aesthetic uniformity. Even the garbage can being too visible from the street on pickup day. It was clear what was happening. They were trying to intimidate me. If they couldn't win against me on the trailer issue, maybe they could bury me in nuisance violations until I gave up. But all they really did was strengthen my resolve. Every time I got one of those letters, I responded calmly, formally, and with the same precision as before. I cited exact bylaws, pointed out inconsistencies, and basically turned their own paperwork into evidence against them. And then came the turning point. One Friday evening, I got a knock on my door. It was another neighbor, this time a woman from the next street over. She was holding a crumpled letter in her hand, and she looked frustrated. "I heard you know how to deal with these letters," she said. "They're saying I have to move my camper van because it's visible from the street. But I've read the bylaws a dozen times, and it doesn't even apply." I invited her in, read the letter, and sure enough, it was the same playbook they'd tried on me. Same vague wording, same misapplied bylaw, same 7-day demand. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just harassment. This was systematic abuse of power. And it wasn't just about me anymore. I helped her draft a response letter, laying out her case the same way I had with mine. She mailed it off, and a few weeks later, guess what? Oh, back down. No fines. No further threats. Just silence. The look on her face when she told me they backed off was priceless. It was relief mixed with vindication. And I knew right then, if the HOA wanted to turn this into a war of attrition, they were in trouble. Because now, I wasn't just defending myself. I was helping my neighbors defend themselves, too. And the more people pushed back, the more cracks started to show in the HOA's armor. At board meetings, people started asking harder questions. Why are we spending so much time chasing trailers and campers when the neighborhood playground hasn't been updated in 10 years? Why are letters going out without proper dates or citations? Why are we wasting dues on enforcement that doesn't even hold up? The board members started squirming, because suddenly, they weren't the ones in control anymore. They were on the defensive. And that's when it dawned on me. This wasn't just about trailers. This was about power. The HOA thrived on people being too tired, too intimidated, or too uninformed to resist. But the second people started standing together, their power started to crumble. And whether I wanted it or not, I had become the spark that lit that fire. Little did I know, the real showdown was still ahead. Because the HOA wasn't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. If the first 2 letters were just skirmishes, the third wave was a full-on assault. I'll never forget the day it happened. I came home from work, grabbed the mail from the box, and there it was, thicker than usual, in a heavy envelope with bold lettering across the top. Final notice, enforcement action. I opened it at the kitchen counter, and as I read, my stomach dropped. The letter claimed I was now facing daily fines for repeated violations, specifically referencing, yes, you guessed it, my utility trailer. According to them, I owed hundreds of dollars already, and the balance would continue to accumulate until the violation is corrected. But here's the kicker. They threatened legal action. They claimed they could place a lien on my home if I didn't comply. That's when it got real. This wasn't just about irritating letters anymore. This was about my property, my home, my family's future. For the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt fear. What if they actually could take legal action? What if they drained my bank account with endless fines? What if this escalated beyond my control? But after that initial wave of panic, something else set in: determination. I sat down with a cup of coffee, spread out all the letters, my responses, the bylaws, everything. And I realized something the HOA was betting I wouldn't. Their entire case was built on sand. They hadn't once cited the correct bylaw. They hadn't once provided proper documentation. They hadn't even dated their first letter. And now, here they were, threatening legal action based on nothing but bluff and bluster. And if they wanted to drag this into a legal arena, well, I was ready for that. The next morning, I called a property attorney I knew. I explained the situation, emailed him the letters and my responses, and asked point blank, do they actually have a case? He laughed. Not even close, he said. They're misapplying bylaws. They're not following due process. And if they tried to put a lien on your house without a valid violation, they'd open themselves up to a counter lawsuit. Honestly, you've already got them cornered. That one phone call flipped everything. The fear drained away. In its place came clarity. I wasn't the one in danger, they were. So I drafted my strongest response yet. I laid out, in painstaking detail, every flaw in their so-called case. The misquoted bylaws, the lack of proper dates, the failure to distinguish between house and travel trailers and utility trailers. I attached copies of their own letters and photos that contradicted their claims. And then I ended with this. If you continue to harass me with baseless violations, I will have no choice but to pursue legal remedies, including but not limited to a claim for harassment and abuse of authority. Any attempt to place a lien on my property without valid grounds will be met with immediate legal action. I printed 2 copies, one for certified mail, one for the board meeting. And that's where the showdown really happened. The meeting room was packed that night. Word had gotten out. Neighbors had heard about the fines, the threats, the escalation. People were curious to see what would happen. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, held my stack of papers, and calmly explained everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lose my temper. I just walked through the facts, step by step, while every board member squirmed in their seat. And when I got to the end, I looked directly at the president of the HOA and said, "This has gone beyond interpretation. This is harassment, and I will not allow it to continue. Either this nonsense stops tonight, or my attorney will see you in court." The room was dead silent. You could hear the air conditioner humming in the corner. Finally, one of the board members cleared his throat and muttered, "We may need to revisit the wording of the bylaw." That was it. No apology. No admission of fault. Just a quiet retreat. But for me, it was victory. Because here's what happened after. The fines vanished. The threats stopped. The letters stopped. And just like that, the HOA backed down. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I started getting knocks on my door again. Not from the HOA this time, from neighbors. People who'd been harassed, fined, or intimidated in similar ways. They wanted advice. They wanted help writing letters. They wanted to know how to fight back. And I realized, in standing up for myself, I had unknowingly given the whole neighborhood permission to stand up too. The HOA didn't crumble overnight. But little by little, the power dynamic shifted. People started asking harder questions at meetings. They demanded transparency. They stopped folding at the first letter. And the board, well, let's just say they became a lot more careful about what they put in writing. As for me, my trailer is still right where it's always been, tucked neatly behind my garage, tagged, insured, and perfectly legal. Every time I see it, it reminds me of something important. HOAs thrive on fear. They thrive on silence. But the second you shine a light on their games, their power starts to evaporate. I didn't set out to be the guy who challenged them. I didn't set out to be some neighborhood hero. I just wanted to park my trailer in peace. But sometimes, the simple act of standing your ground does more than protect your rights. Sometimes, it inspires everyone else to do the same. And that's how one so-called abandoned trailer turned into the battle that changed my whole neighborhood.